Amina wiped the sweat from her forehead as she walked through the busy streets of Zanzibar, the sun burning high above. Her life had never been easy, but she had learned to find joy in the small things, helping others, even when she had little for herself. The marketplace bustled with people bargaining for fresh fish, spices, and fabrics, but Amina's focus was always on a particular corner, where a group of beggars sat every day, waiting for mercy from strangers. There was old Jafar, his legs too weak to stand. He sat on a piece of torn cloth, his bony hands stretched out, shaking as he whispered for help. Then there was Fatuma, a woman in her 50s, covered in a dusty hijab, eyes filled with silent sorrow. The youngest among them was Nasor, a thin man in his 30s, always coughing, always hunched over as if carrying an invisible burden. People walked past them every day, barely sparing them a glance. But Amina wasn't like the others. Even though she struggled to make ends meet, selling handmade baskets near the market, she always saved a little for them. Some days it was bread, other days a few coins. She didn't have much, but she believed in giving, no matter how small. "May Allah bless you, my child," old Jafar whispered one afternoon as she handed him a warm chapati. "You always think of us," Fatuma added, her voice trembling. Amina smiled, kneeling beside them. "We are all the same in Allah's eyes," she said. "No one should go hungry while others eat." But the world didn't see things the way she did. "Why do you waste your money on them?" her friend Zuwaina asked one day. "They're just beggars, lazy people who refuse to work." Amina sighed. "How do you know their story? Have you ever asked?" Zuwaina rolled her eyes. "You're too soft, Amina. One day you'll learn." That day came sooner than she expected. One evening, as Amina was leaving the market, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. Jafar, the weak old man who could barely move, stood up without any struggle. His legs, which always seemed too frail to support him, carried him with ease. Amina froze. She blinked, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her. But no, there he was, walking smoothly into a narrow alley, as if he had never needed help in his life. Her heart pounded. Why would he pretend to be crippled? She followed him, keeping her distance, her mind racing with questions. Jafar disappeared behind a small building, and just as Amina was about to turn back, another shock hit her. Nasor, the man who always coughed and trembled, pulled out something from his pocket, a phone. But not just any phone. A brand new, expensive model that Amina had only seen in luxury stores. Her breath caught in her throat. A beggar, with a phone worth more than everything she owned? She watched as he made a quick call, speaking in a low, firm voice. Nothing like the weak, desperate tone he used when begging. Amina felt cold all over. Had she been fooled all this time? Had she wasted her kindness on people who didn't need it? She wanted answers, and she was going to get them. Amina pressed herself against the wall of a narrow alley, her heart racing. The evening air had cooled, but a strange heat burned inside her. Confusion, disbelief, anger. For months, she had given everything she could to these beggars. She had skipped meals to make sure Jafar ate. She had used her last coins to buy medicine for Nazor. She had held Fatuma's hands and listened to her cries of misery. And now she was watching Nazor, the same man who had always appeared sickly and weak, speaking into an expensive phone with the confidence of a businessman. His posture had changed, straight, powerful. His voice, once frail and shaky, now carried authority. "Tomorrow, same time," Nazor said, his voice clear. "No mistakes." Amina swallowed hard. Who was he talking to? What was happening tomorrow? She stayed hidden as Nasor tucked the phone back into the deep folds of his tattered robe. Then he walked briskly down the alley, no sign of the limp he always had when begging. Amina's mind screamed for answers, but she forced herself to stay calm. She needed to be smart about this, so she did something she had never done before. She followed him. Nazor walked past the dimly lit streets, moving toward the edge of the marketplace, where the crowd thinned. Amina's heart pounded harder when she saw where he was headed. A black car. A sleek, shining black car parked in the shadows. A car that no beggar should be able to afford. She ducked behind a stack of wooden crates as Nazor opened the back door and slipped inside. The moment the door shut, the car roared to life, its headlights slicing through the night. And then, it was gone. Amina stood frozen, her pulse hammering. What had she just witnessed? The Nazor she knew would never get into a car like that. The Nazor she knew could barely afford food. Unless Unless everything had been a lie. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The next morning, Amina arrived at the marketplace earlier than usual. She set up her baskets in her usual spot, but her eyes weren't on her customers. They were on the beggars. Jafar sat slumped in his usual place, looking weak and helpless. Fatuma rocked back and forth, whispering prayers under her breath. And Nasor was back to his hunched posture, coughing into his fist, his robe dirtier than ever. Amina clenched her fists. How could they pretend so easily? She wanted to march up to them and demand the truth, but something told her to wait. Observe. Watch for more signs. And that's when she noticed it. Jafar's hands. The old man's hands had always trembled. His fingers were thin, his skin wrinkled with age. But today, something was different. His nails. Amina's eyes narrowed. They were clean. Too clean. Not the nails of someone who spent every day on the streets. Not the nails of a beggar who barely had enough water to drink, let alone wash himself properly. Then, as if sensing her eyes on him, Jafar suddenly coughed and curled his fingers into fists. Amina's blood ran cold. He had noticed. She quickly looked away, pretending to be busy with her baskets, but she could feel his eyes on her. Something was wrong. And then, just as she was debating whether to confront them, something unexpected happened. A man appeared. A man she had never seen before. Tall, dressed in a simple white kanzu, but with an air of quiet authority. He approached the beggars with slow, measured steps. The moment he reached them, Jafar's face changed. The weakness vanished. The helpless old man disappeared, and in his place was someone else, someone alert, someone in control. Amina watched in stunned silence as Jafar, who had always begged for a few coins, rose to his feet and bowed slightly to the man. Bowed, like a servant greeting his master. Amina's breath caught in her throat. Who were these people? The man leaned in and spoke to them in hushed tones. Jafar nodded. Fatuma wiped her face, suddenly looking much stronger. Nasor straightened up, his coughing completely gone. And then, just as quickly as he had come, the man walked away. Jafar sat back down. Fatuma resumed rocking. Nasor hunched over once more. The act was back on. Amina felt dizzy. She had seen enough. This wasn't just a group of beggars. This was something bigger, something dangerous. She had to find out the truth, no matter what. Amina's heart pounded as she sat behind her small stall, her hands shaking slightly as she wove a new basket. But she wasn't focused on her work. Her mind was racing, replaying everything she had seen. The clean nails, the expensive phone, the black car, the mysterious man, the bow. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. Jafar, Nasor, and Fatuma were not who they pretended to be. But the question that burned inside her, the one that made her restless, was why? Why would anyone pretend to be poor, to suffer, to beg for food and coins when they clearly had access to something greater? Amina had lived in poverty all her life. She knew what it meant to go to bed hungry, to wake up with no hope of change. No one chose to be poor. So what were these people hiding? She had to find out. That evening, she made a plan. She couldn't just walk up to them and demand answers. If they were faking poverty, there had to be a serious reason behind it. And if there was a reason, there was danger. She needed to be careful. So she waited until the marketplace quieted down, until the stalls were being closed and the streets emptied. Then, just like the night before, she followed them. This time, she wasn't going to let them disappear. Jafar moved first. He stood up with the same slow, painful movements he always used when people were watching. But the moment he reached the darker streets, his entire body changed. His back straightened, his steps became confident, his arms, which had always seemed frail, swung with strength. Amina's pulse raced as she followed from a distance, hiding in the shadows. Jafar led her farther than the night before, past the alleys she knew, past the places she felt safe. The further they went, the more uneasy she became. And then he stopped, right in front of a massive iron gate. Amina's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just any house. It was a mansion. Hidden behind high walls, the gate was the only visible part of it. It looked like something out of a rich man's dream, clean, new, expensive. Why was a beggar coming here? Amina crouched behind an abandoned cart, pressing herself into the shadows as Jafar pulled out a key and unlocked the gate like he owned the place. A key. Her mouth went dry. Before she could even process that, 2 black cars rolled up behind him. Amina ducked lower, her heart slamming against her ribs. The cars stopped and out stepped Nasor and Fatuma. But they weren't dressed like beggars anymore. Nasor had changed into a crisp, tailored suit. Fatuma wore an elegant, embroidered dress with gold bangles on her wrists. They looked like royalty. Amina gripped the edge of the cart, her legs trembling. The truth was staring her right in the face. They were rich, unbelievably, filthy rich. But why were they living like beggars? Her stomach churned as the three of them walked inside, disappearing behind the heavy gates. The moment they were gone, the street was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. Amina's breath came in sharp gasps. She had followed them hoping for answers. Instead, she had stumbled into a secret she was never meant to know. And secrets this big always had consequences. She had two choices: walk away and pretend she never saw anything, or dig deeper. Amina clenched her fists. She had spent too much of her life being ignored, being looked down upon, being told she was too soft, too naive. Not this time. She was going to find out the truth, even if it was the last thing she did. Amina barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the mansion, the black cars, the way Nazor's tattered robe had been replaced with a suit so sharp it looked like it had never seen dust. Nothing made sense. If they were billionaires, why would they live on the streets, pretending to be poor? Why would they let people throw pity at them when they had everything? Unless it wasn't a choice. Unless something bigger was at play. Amina sat up, her hands clenched into fists. She had to confront them. She had to get the truth from their own mouths. Morning couldn't come fast enough. The next day, Amina arrived at the marketplace earlier than usual, her heart pounding as she set up her stall. She didn't even pretend to focus on selling today. Her eyes were locked on the beggars. Fatuma was already in her usual spot, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers with her head covered. Nazor was coughing weakly, his head low. Jafar sat with his hands stretched out, his face full of misery. It was all an act. Amina's fingers dug into the fabric of her dress. She waited until the crowd thinned, then took a deep breath and marched straight to them. Her sudden approach made Nazor flinch. Jafar's hand froze midair. Fatuma stopped whispering. They knew she had seen something. But Amina didn't give them time to react. She crouched in front of them, her voice low but firm. I know. Jafar blinked. Know what, child? Amina clenched her jaw. I know you're not beggars. I saw you last night. Fatuma's fingers tightened around her shawl. Nazor swallowed hard. Jafar, however, smiled. A slow, knowing smile. And what exactly did you see, Amina? He asked, his voice no longer weak, no longer trembling. It was strong. Calm. The same voice she had heard last night when he bowed to the mysterious man. Amina's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. I saw you walk into that mansion. I saw Nazor in a suit. I saw everything. Silence, thick, heavy. Then Jafar chuckled softly. I knew you were sharp, he murmured. I told them you'd figure it out first. Amina frowned. Them? Before she could ask, Jafar gestured for her to sit beside him. Amina hesitated. Then slowly, she lowered herself onto the ground. People walked past them, seeing nothing but a young woman speaking to three beggars. If only they knew. Jafar took a deep breath. What I'm about to tell you, Amina, is something very few people in this city know. Amina swallowed. We are not just rich, Jafar continued. We are part of something bigger. Amina's hands clenched into fists. Bigger? How? Fatuma finally spoke, her voice calm but heavy. There are two kinds of wealthy people in this world. Amina, she said. Those who inherit their money and do nothing with it, and those who understand that money is a test. Amina frowned. A test? Nazor exhaled. We were given everything a person could want, power, wealth, influence, but we were to be the kind of rich people who sit in golden palaces while others starve. Amina's heart raced. So, you gave it all up? She whispered. Jafar shook his head. No, we hid it. Amina's pulse pounded in her ears. The three of us belong to an ancient order, Jafar continued, his voice low. A secret group of billionaires who choose to live among the poor, to experience suffering firsthand, to see who truly deserves help and who is only after money. Amina's head spun. She had never heard anything like this before. Nazor watched her carefully. Have you ever wondered why some people remain poor no matter how much you help them? And why others rise even when they have nothing? Amina swallowed. She had seen it all her life. Some people took every opportunity and climbed, while others wasted everything and stayed in the same place. Fatuma's voice was soft. The world is full of pretenders, Amina. People who only want help when it is easy. People who complain but never change. Jafar nodded. So we disguise ourselves. We watch. We test people. Amina's stomach turned. And what happens when you find someone who truly deserves help? Jafar's smile returned. We change their lives forever. Amina's breath caught. Fatuma leaned forward. Tell me, child, if you had the power to give someone everything, money, business, education, land, how would you choose who deserves it? Amina's mouth went dry. She had never thought about it like that. Jafar's voice softened. This world is full of people who only want wealth without effort. But a few are different. A few are truly worthy. Amina exhaled shakily. So all these months you were watching me? Jafar smiled. Yes. Nazar's eyes gleamed. And we have our answer. Amina's heart stopped. Jafar reached into his robe and pulled out an envelope. He held it out to her. Her fingers trembled as she took it. When she opened it, her breath left her body. Inside was a deed to a house in her name. Fatuma placed a gentle hand on Amina's shoulder. You have always given, even when you had nothing. You passed the test, child. Tears blurred Amina's vision. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Jafar smiled. You helped the beggars, Amina. His eyes twinkled. And now, the beggars help you. Amina pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was finally free.